Oh, I'm always adjusting. Hey, it's Kim. Good to be here with you. Oh, I forgot to turn my light on. So it's a little dark in here. Hold on. I'm just not at all ready for today. There we go. There we go. We are just, it is hot. It is like 95 degrees here, which we're not used to in the Bay Area. Sorry, a little headband on. I'm like, my hair is all over the place. And I did manage to coordinate with my shirt. So, there you go. Even though my shirt is a little frazzled. Let's talk about how I look for another few minutes, shall we? Anyway, I am coming to you from Berkeley, California, where we are having our, as they call it, Indian summer. It is 95 degrees today, which it did not get all of June or July. Maybe not even, maybe a day or two in August, these crazy weather patterns here. So I get to complain about the weather, given what's going on in the rest of the world. So I had a few questions people were asking me at the last session, and it would have been really smart of me to remember what those questions were, but I can look them up. And one of them was, I know, asking about how I am eating these days and what I'm doing, to do what I do. And so I'm still doing sort of lower carb, higher protein, moderate fat. I'm calorie controlled. I track. I keep a log of all my foods. So that because I was just talking about this with a client that I foresee myself tracking for the rest of my life. It keeps me grounded, saner, connected to what I'm eating. Yeah, so I'm really somebody that I'm like, yeah, I think that's just what I do, because when I take my sort of attention off of that, it doesn't go as well for me. And I want things to feel, sane and easy. That being said, if I found that that was making me crazy, like if I was a person that I didn't like tracking, like if that didn't make my life work better, then I would have I would create an alternative plan. To keep me on track in terms of my weight loss, because for me, I've experienced weight loss and weight regain and that kind of thing. And I don't want to do that the rest of my life. I don't want to keep that pattern. So I am going to look at these questions. I found them. So Michelle asked what my weight loss strategy is. And so it's, tracking, and it's picking the foods that work for me. So over the course of my journey, those foods have shifted a bit. So, when I first went on my health journey, I was like keto, carbs under 20 grams, higher fat, moderate protein. And then over the course of the last 8 years, that shifted a few times, right? I went to a little bit more protein and a little less fat, but still pretty close to keto. And then I shifted again to more like 50 grams of carbs, you know, and so now I'm more like, not like moderate carbs. Like if they get up even till 75 or 100 some days, it doesn't bother me. My fat is kind of on the lower end comparatively, not low, but lower, and my protein is pretty high. And so the macros themselves have shifted over the years, but the macro tracking has not, right? Because I still track the macros. I track with an app called Macro Factor, which helps me sort of it's responsive. So it'll say, what was you put in what your goal is, sort of like what a coach does, right? What is your goal? What are you trying to achieve? And then, it sees what you've been eating. And then it says, you need to lower your calories, or you need to raise them, or to more match your goal. So, and then I try and get to the gym twice a week. I try and go for a walk most days. And that's just paying attention to that, being conscious, um, and tracking. Those are my strategies. And then also being aware, like, do I have it in me to to aggressively like try and lose weight this week? Is it a week where I'm just going to try and maintain, like going into my week kind of knowing what that week looks like, and not like setting myself up for failure. I plan what I'm going to eat in advance, so I don't go into a day blind, right? I always kind of have planned my day. So when like sometimes I'm planning it just looks like, well, I know all week we're having steak and veg, right? So I'm like, okay, well, dinner's taken care of because I cut a big piece of meat and we're having steak every night. And for lunch it's usually something very similar. So and for my breakfast, I know what I tend to eat. Right? So it's not like I have to have it down to the exact detail, but I never go in like, it could be anything. This is a hair clip. It could be anything. That I'm a fidgeter. That I think if you go in like without some semblance of plan, it often goes very, very poorly. So I don't go into my days blind. And let's see, I'm just looking for other questions. People like the celeriac lactose that I make. I see that. Okay, I got one. I knew there was one about A1C, but I couldn't remember the details. It says, I got this from Joseph. When I eat higher protein and lower fat, did my glucose or A1C go up in any way? I have been low carb and keto for almost 3 years and still have glucose readings in the triple digits, and my A1C is going up. I don't know if more fats in my diet is the right answer. Any thought? So I'm not somebody with glucose problems. So we're all a little different out there in the world. My A1C on a moderate carb diet is 5, 4.9 to 5.1, so 5. And that's eating up to like 100-ish grams of carbs a day for a while. So I used to be pre-diabetic, or like right on the cusp pre-diabetic, was like 5.7. And I went keto, came down. And since then, I have not had glucose issues. I can eat a super high protein diet. Glucose is not crazy. So for me, myself, no, I don't have, those issues. Shoot, you guys, it's when it gets this hot here in the Bay Area, the internet can kind of go funky, and that may be what we're experiencing. So if this is very unpleasant to watch, then we should reschedule probably. The power grid cannot handle this level of heat here. So and so if everyone's telling me it's super duper glitchy, that's what I'm hearing from people here, then we can call it a night. And it cleared up. Okay. Let me know if it gets bad again. So so I am somebody who my glucose is really in good shape at this point with the way that I eat and function, and I am insulin sensitive. And so for me, it's not a problem. But I acknowledge and am aware that that there are people that are very sensitive and still have glucose issues. And for them, it does seem to, for some people, they can become somewhat protein sensitive. And so we got to go case by case with people. We do find that some people need, a higher fat and lower protein. Some people need, you know, uh, yeah, to watch those things. Some people, depending on how much body fat they have, that can make things look different. So it's got to be kind of a N=1 investigation in terms of what's going to be best for you. And so I totally acknowledge that is a thing for sure. It's not a thing for me. And that's just, because you asked the question about me, and no, I didn't notice that, but some people absolutely do. Jane asked, "Do I drink enough water that?" Sorry, I heard a weird noise. "Do I drink enough water to be hydrated? Meaning, is my urine a pale yellow or close to clear? I recently realized I was dehydrated after a blood test result. My hemoglobin, hematocrit, and red blood cells were on the high end of normal. Retested after hydrating, and result was much better." Um, yeah, I mean, that's the thing, right? You don't want clear urine that's overhydrated. You want it to be a pale yellow. So, that usually works for most people in terms of dialing in the appropriate level of hydration. And I think that a lot of us are running around a little bit dehydrated for sure. So making sure you're drinking plenty of liquids, tea, water, those kinds of things that are going to hydrate you is a good idea for everybody. For sure, for sure. I am so hot. Like, I'm schwitzing over here. All right. Um, all right. What else is going on out there in the world? Okay, what else? Those were my preset questions. And when your brain overheats and you're like, I should know what I'm talking about. Okay, so what else is going on in the world? I'm so sorry, guys. I'm literally glitching. I'm like overheating and glitching over here. So, yeah, I think. Oh, I have a thing to talk about just because I like to talk. A family member of mine recently, who is in their 80s, got their lipids tested for the first time and got back a result that their LDL was pretty high. And the doctor who tested the lipids freaked out on them and put them on statins. Now, I'm not like 100% against statins in the right scenario. Okay. Do I want to take them, or would I recommend them to most people, or do I think they should be the first line of defense? Absolutely not. But I am saying that, sort of like, David Diamond says, if somebody's unwilling to change their lifestyle in any way, maybe they have a place. But I am aware of how much they help, right? Which is somewhat, but not a lot in terms of mortality. There's like a 1% or so general improvement in mortality to take them versus not. Now, other things I do know are more powerful, right? So I'm very much more like, hey, let's go with lifestyle rather than drugs. But I'm not like all drugs should be abandoned, right? It just depends on the person. Um, and and so this family member, her glucose was high and her C-reactive protein was high. And I was like, those are the two things that have the biggest bang for their buck in terms of heart disease risk. So anyway, she went on this statin and came back. She hasn't changed anything else. And she's like, my doctor said I'm doing such a good job because my LDL came down. And it's like, yeah, you're like, I'm like, not my monkeys. If somebody I will explain things if somebody wants to hear about it. But so many people just want to be kind of a pat on the head and like, oh, this helped and I just have to take a pill, rather than, looking at what actually moves the needle on not having a heart attack. And that's something that's really hard out there. And, around you guys, around the keto community, around the low carb, just all the healthy people, or the people who are really focused on getting healthy. I get so used to people who are like, I'm willing to change my life to be a healthy human. I'm willing to do these things. And like you guys are. And then when you talk to somebody else and you're like, oh, yeah, you're not willing to do the things to change the things that actually make the true difference. Right. And so that is disheartening sometimes. Anyway, it's kind of one of the downsides of people telling you all their blood work all the time. All right. B. Betsy says, how long do I go high protein before shifting to higher fat or other macro shift? I, at this point, don't. I just do higher protein, moderate carb, moderate fat all the time because it's kind of the thing that just works the best for me at this point. But when I first started on keto, certainly the higher fat, um, low carb was a very important transitional period for me to change sort of my biochemistry, to change my brain around the kind of foods that I chose to eat and to stay off of the kinds of foods that I didn't have good self control around, like pastries, because they were pretty much off the menu, right? And so I don't so to answer the question, I don't it's not like I shift back and forth between high protein and high fat at this point. I just feel good on higher protein, moderate carb, moderate fat. And so I just stay there. If something changed in my life, if I came down with an illness that being in ketosis would help me with, I would certainly do it. I'm not against it. I listen to my food. My food choices are based on the way of eating I find the most satiating these days. And when I first went keto, I did not find I love vegetables. I've always loved vegetables, but I didn't find filling my plate with vegetables made me very full, made me very satiated. And so it was the higher fat and protein combo that made me feel really good. And over time, that shifted. I started to gain some weight. And I found that shifting the fat down, the protein up helped. And then I found at some point of doing that for a while, I was hungry and I thought, well, let me add back the vegetables and see if that helps. And it started actually to help me with satiety, made me feel more full to include a bunch of veggies with my meal compared to not having them, which wasn't always true. And so I just kind of listened to that transition. And so if my body tells me, through my hunger signals and my satiety and how I feel after I eat and what I'm craving, not like the like little demons craving things, but like, truly like feeling like I need this to feel nourished, then I would shift. But I have been very happy with the sort of higher protein, moderate carb, moderate fat approach for the last 3 years, I think. I think. Betsy said, I seem to undereat protein. How much protein do I aim for in a day? Minimum of 110 grams up to 150 grams, somewhere in there, and I'm fine. So that generally looks like I'm eating 3 times a day. So that generally looks like I tend to get a good amount at dinner. That's pretty normal for people. So I might get 50 grams at dinner, and 30 grams at breakfast and 30 grams at lunch. So that's kind of an easy way to break it down. Thanks, Jane, for the compliment. I appreciate it as I'm spitzing over here. I told you guys I'm a fidgeter. I have a hair tie. There's always something that I'm fidgeting with. Um, so, I think if you're somebody that undereats protein, the best thing to do is kind of plan your day around your protein sources. I mean, not your whole day, your eating of the day. There are other things but eating in a day, right? So that would be like, okay, well, if I'm having 2 meals and I know I need to get 100 grams of protein in, then it's 50-50 or 40-60, and so how am I going to do that? If you go in blind, it's really hard to get it in unless you're like, mostly carnivore, in which case if you're mostly carnivore, if you're mostly carnivore, it shouldn't be hard to get your protein in. If you're struggling to get your protein in and you're mostly carnivore, that might be a sign that maybe your fat is a little high for your hunger level, right? And that happened to me at one point where I was eating more high fat and not as much protein, and Canberry challenged me to bump my protein up to like 150 grams. And I couldn't do it at the level of fat that I was eating. At the time, I just felt sickly full. And so I went for some leaner sources of meat so that I could get the protein in. And that was sort of like, oh, I feel better. I function better. Life works better. So I went a little leaner at that point. That was kind of a mid range choice. And so for me, it was changing from like ribeyes, which I still like, but, it wasn't like a ribeye a day anymore. It was like a ribeye occasionally. And then my more daily choices was maybe um, skirt steak or flank steak or something like that instead. So if you're mostly carnivore or ketovore or even, keto range and you want to get a little more protein in, the easy way to make that shift is going to be eat well first, maybe reducing added fat so you're a little hungrier so you can eat more meat. And if you've already done that and you're still under on your protein, then switching it up so that you're eating more high the meat, the piece of meat you're eating is a little bit leaner, which means it's going to have more protein and less fat within that same piece of meat, right? Because it's there's only really two things in, well, there's water, protein, and fat in most meat, right? And so if you want to get more protein and less, then you're kind of just scooting it around. I think that's the problem for me. It says higher fat eating. I start with 3 eggs and 4 strips of bacon, and then don't eat enough protein during the second meal. Yeah, so um, maybe 3 eggs and some chicken sausage, which has more protein and a little less fat in it. Or maybe it's 2 eggs and a mess of egg whites with it, right? I love egg yolks. They're full of good for you things. I'm not anti egg yolk, but egg whites are a great source of protein. So you can just cook up some extra egg whites to go with your eggs. Just throw in some extra protein into your day. Or, so instead of 3 eggs and 4 strips of bacon, have 2 eggs, 2 egg whites, 2 strips of bacon. So you don't have to change it completely, but just alter it a little bit so you're there. And then, at dinner, instead of a ribeye with your dinner, have, a London broil, something that's a little more protein and a little less fat. Not because there's anything wrong with the fat, but because, gosh, I'm too full and fat is filling. And then if I bump that down a little bit, I'm going to have a little more room for some of the other um, macronutrients, as they say. All right, guys, I'm going to call it a day because I'm going to get in a cold shower because I'm dying of heat stroke over here. So I hope you're all having a fabulous week, and I will see you next week.